don't have love? No, my dad says it's just a myth. My dad thinks that I have bubbles in my brain because I believe in love. He says that the only way I can get out of my wedding is if I can prove to him that love exists. That means I only get 3 days, or else I'll be swimming down the aisle with that blowfish.
Welcome to the Graveyard Slot, where we talk about movies past their prime time.
Here, we revisit old favorites with a fresh perspective to see if they deserve more credit or if they should stay buried. I'm Sohini.
And I'm Sarah, and today we're talking about Aquamarine. Aquamarine follows two 13-year-old girls who find and befriend a mermaid named Aquamarine, who promises to grant them a wish if they help her prove to her father that love exists. This movie was released in 2006, and it was directed by Elizabeth Allen Rosenbaum, who did Ramona and Beezus and a slew of network dramas. This was actually adapted from a book by the same name by Alice Hoffman, but the movie is wildly different from its source material.
We wanted to discuss this movie because it's actually one of Sarah's favorite movies.
Okay, that's not true. I mean, it's just like a movie I grew up with and I'm very fond of.
Okay, fine. Obviously, the way you talked about it, I could tell that it was kind of like a household staple for you, whereas I hadn't heard of it before and you were pretty offended by that. So we decided to rectify the situation and have me watch it so that we could compare Sarah's perspective revisiting it and my completely new one, as I had no memories attached to it or much context as to what the movie was about.
I've seen this movie multiple times as a kid, probably only once as an adult, and I still like it a lot. I think a lot of it is my fondness for this movie tangled up in my memories as a kid, but I can totally understand why I liked this when I was younger, and for me the same charm still worked. And now what's changed is that I can recognize that I don't know if it's a low budget movie per se, but it's not like, the most well-made movie, but the whole production was so charming to me, like the bad green screen, the less than stellar acting even, the obvious sets, the weird audio. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's so much ADR in this. Now I like those details. Though, I don't think it makes a very good movie, but I still have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I can understand why. I can't say much for my taste when I was a kid, because I not only watched but enjoyed New York Minute, for which I am now deeply embarrassed. But I also think I would have liked this movie as a kid. That being said, I am not a kid, so my experience now was slightly less than positive, but I can say it was still a fun movie.
The reviews I found were actually better than I expected. There's one from Variety that says, "A large part of the pic's charm stems from its relatively daring approach to wrapping up various plot threads in the final reel, as filmmakers take an unexpected and wholly satisfying turn towards something like realism. Without getting too heavy-handed with moralizing or message-mongering, filmmakers suggest that gaining maturity and self-awareness may be more important than fancy fulfilling happily ever aftering." And I think this review is actually giving the movie more credit than it deserves, even though I do agree that the movie does exactly what that review says. I don't know how well they executed it, but the point, I think, is true enough.
I agreed with some of it. I think the word that stood out to me was daring.
Yeah, I can see how it could have easily ended in a different way, but I don't think this was unpredictable either. I don't think it was a brave choice or anything.
As far as movies of this genre go, it was pretty typical. It pretty much stuck to the typical elements you can expect. That's what we got. I don't think we got anything out of the ordinary with this one, but at least it maintained a certain level of quality regarding the ending, like the way the story went. At least it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah. What I liked about this movie is that they used, I guess, those really predictable tropes or whatever to explore something a little different. Like, again, I don't think it's brave or unpredictable or anything, but I like that they specifically used those very predictable, story beats and used it for something that's only a little different than what it seems on the surface.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you find a review that spoke to you?
I did, and it's slightly less positive than yours. This one's from the TV Guide magazine, and it says, aside from an inspired bit involving a pair of sycophantic starfish, it's amazing how unimaginative a movie about a mermaid can be, and it's sad how thoroughly its girl power stylings devolve into a muddle of mixed messages. This one resonated with me because it highlights a pretty big issue I had with not only this movie, but a lot of the movies made around this time, which is the demonization of femininity. This is something we spoke about when we were watching A Cinderella Story as well. And I understand it's partly a product of its time. And at its heart, this movie is about friendship and female empowerment, but I feel like the message falls a little bit flat when it's got characters like Cecilia, who's the antagonist, I guess, and her group of friends who are basically just bullies with no other aspects to their character. And we can get into it later on, but it just undermined the message of the movie for me.
One part that I don't quite agree with in this review, I don't think it has any girl power stylings.
Well, it's got the don't need no man thing.
Does it? I don't think it does.
Because it's not about finding a man, it's just about proving love exists. And she's got this very limited idea of what love is like, but that's what she learns in the movie, is that it's not restricted to love with a guy.
They don't really say that. The movie doesn't say, like, you don't need to be in a relationship to be worthy. They don't say the opposite, but they don't say that either. Like, this can easily be about two boys and a merman. Like, there's not really anything with, like, gender dynamics there. At least I didn't read any.
Yeah, I think the review is conflating the fact that it's about 3 girls.
Exactly. It's this thing where, like, just because it features a woman or a girl, it has to be for women. It has to be about feminism. It's like, no, it's just a movie. And it just stars a woman. Like,
that's a good point. Now that you pointed out, the phrasing is a little bit, it's perhaps missing the point of the movie. But the part I do agree with is the mixed messages.
Alright, so we'll be discussing this movie chronologically, as always. We meet Haley and Claire while they're at the beach club ogling their crush, Raymond the lifeguard, aka this movie's generic white guy. One of the things I actually really like about this movie is how much our main characters look like real 13-year-olds. They look so young and awkward, and they're styled like it too. This is also present in their characterization, how Claire is kind of shy and still hasn't quite come out of her shell, and how Haley is still really self-conscious about her body.
It definitely is very tiring to see these movies that are meant to feature school kids, but they look like they're already well into adulthood. It really takes me out of the movie.
Okay, so this time around, it hit me how weird it was that these kids are kind of ogling this much older guy who really looks like a fully grown man. But the movie does a pretty good job of never alluding to them actually, expecting a reciprocal relationship with Raymond. It's very much crush from afar on the, most popular guy, like treating him as a borderline celebrity. The entire time, we see Raymond from this filtered lens of a preteen girl who has a puppy crush and not as a real regular teenage boy. And I really like how they do that.
I do think the girls are quite deluded. I wouldn't completely agree that they have no expectation of reciprocation from Ray.
No, I don't think they have no expectations. I think the movie makes it clear that it's not in the cards.
Yeah, and part of that is the fact that Ray treats them very appropriately. So that's how the movie makes it clear that it's the girls, basically, like you said, having a crush on a celebrity figure.
But also, not even just the way the characters interact with each other, but like the way they look. The kids look like kids, and Raymond looks like somebody who's about to be an adult. I guess I'm saying like everything else, like the direction and the styling and everything. It makes it clear that this is just like a meaningless crush.
Yeah.
I do want to point out one thing in that beach scene, is that while Haley and Claire are talking about all of these teen magazines that give advice about boys, they use the term boy bagging technology. And it just made me cackle. Something about the language felt very early 2000s and pretty true to life to the kind of magazines they were talking about. Like, it's so ridiculous. I absolutely loved it.
I think it hit me quite early on that much of the dialogue was going to be slightly on the nose. They have a lot of exposition going on pretty quickly through the dialogue. The fact that Haley is moving in a couple of days' time, the fact that it's been the whole summer holiday and Claire hasn't gone into the water once. It's a lot of information coming at us in a not so creative way.
For sure. Here we also meet the mean and, I'm assuming, popular girls, a group led by Cecilia. It's a little confusing to me why Cecilia and her friends pay any attention to Claire and Haley, because as I understand it, they're much older, probably Raymond's age, so maybe they're around 18. Why would they even be in the same circle as these two 13-year-olds? I get that they frequent the same beach club, but hundreds of people do. That part is a little unclear to me.
The only thing I can think of is, I have to preface my theory by saying that it is absurd. Because this is the only thing Cecilia is characterized by, is her interest in Ray. So the fact that the girls are also interested in Ray is annoying to her, but she as an adult obviously knows that this is not going to happen. They're no real threat. So I don't understand either. It was very absurd to me throughout that these seniors, or possibly they have already graduated, these adults are bullying two kids who have not even stepped into 8th grade yet.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. This is why also the fact that these are the popular girls bullying our main characters for no reason. It's like they're just there to cause conflict, and there's no thought to their characters, no actual reason why they're there except to be boy crazy, and the fact that they're also hyper feminine is what I didn't like.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
I don't think it's necessarily done to be outright sexist.
Yeah, it's just very much like the fabric of the culture at the time, right?
Yeah, because I can think of multiple movies. A Cinderella story, even a movie like Monte Carlo where the popular girls were on screen for maybe a total of 3 seconds. They were also wearing pink and they had blonde hair, and, High School Musical, think of Sharpay. It's just everywhere. So even if you're not doing it actively to be sexist, it's like minimal thought put into it. Like you think school antagonist and immediately it's the hyper feminine, popular girly girl.
Yeah, for sure. One last person we're introduced to in the scene is Leonard. He's painted as this creepy maintenance guy.
Yeah, to be honest, I kept forgetting about him until they showed him on screen again. I was like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be a thing.
He's very forgettable. But we move on and see Haley unpacking boxes at her home. And like you said, she's gonna be moving to Australia for her mother's work as a marine biologist. Haley's in denial because she wants to stay with Claire and has been consistently unpacking. This poor mother, honestly.
Yeah, it's my theory that Haley has just been unpacking for the last however many years. And the effort continues. Because the mom says it's taken her 10 years to get this grant. But I think that's just a cover-up. I think she's been trying to move, but Haley just keeps unpacking through the years.
And that is our first absurd conclusion.
I think it's very reasonable conclusion. That's the first thing she does when she gets home. It's like her daily routine.
Yeah. There's a really funny scene that night when they're having a sleepover and lamenting their impending separation. Haley immediately talks about how they should dance with Raymond at the last splash, an upcoming event, and he'll marry one of them. I took that as her admittedly not serious plan to stay in Florida. It really tickled me that her solution is to become a child bride.
Yeah, I think Raymond is her default quick change the subject solution, because every time Claire brings up the fact that she's gonna leave, Haley immediately starts talking about Ray.
Yeah.
The main question I had while watching this movie was, what's the plan? Because she doesn't want to move to Australia, but what is her plan? Is she just gonna keep unpacking for perpetuity and keep kicking the sign over? Because that's not really doing much.
No, yeah, but it's a kid's plan,
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. As a much older viewer than the target audience, it's pretty easy to tell that Haley's being pretty delusional about her situation. I guess my issue was they're not actively looking for a solution. I guess they know that they're pretty powerless, but even then, I feel like they're naive enough to at least give it an honest try. Like, do anything to keep her from moving, but they don't really do anything until they stumble upon a magical way out.
Yeah. I guess she just thinks, like, if she just keeps unpacking. Hey, it's worked for the last 10 years, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was sweet.
So there's a storm overnight that floods the pool, and the next morning, Claire accidentally falls in. She sees a weird creature before being rescued by Raymond. We find out here that Claire is deathly terrified of going into water because her parents drowned in the ocean.
This information is given to us so abruptly.
Yeah.
They allude to it earlier on in the introductory scene, but the way Haley just drops that bomb of information is so sudden. And this is where I realized that I have an issue with the pacing in this movie, because there are other instances where it's moving either too fast or too slow, and yeah, especially this moment, which is pretty serious. Like, she's talking about a pretty big traumatic event in Claire's life, but she just drops that information so casually and so randomly. I was kind of shocked.
But another funny thing, or not another funny thing, Raymond takes off his shirt before jumping in to pull Claire out. Like, doesn't that waste him precious seconds? This is the first clue we get that he's an awful lifeguard, and we see this later again at the end. It's a relatively medium-sized pool. You don't gotta do with all the dramatics. It just came off as one of those stupid things teen boys do because they shot it straight. It's not the more dramatized moments that we get later on. Like, this means that in the reality of this world, that is how Raymond acts, you know? Like, not with the slow-mo and the leaping and the wind in his hair, but the taking off his shirt part is true enough, you know?
It was it was unnecessary, but whatever.
Okay, even though this is gonna be part of something that I like about this movie for a very specific reason, it did bother me a little how much they make these girls incredibly boy crazy. They have crushes, sure, they talk about boys, yada yada, but here they're in like the way people who have never met a girl before think of preteen girls.
Yes. Thank you.
Only ever thinking about liking boys. It's just like all the time, 24/7. After Claire is traumatized by falling into the pool, all Haley can talk about is how it must feel being in Raymond's arms. I mean, dude, come on.
This struck me too, because I get it's supposed to be funny or whatever, but Haley comes across as so insensitive, because not only did she almost drown, but she has this huge trauma relating to the water, and Haley doesn't even ask if she's all right. One of the things I do like about this movie is the depiction of the friendship between Claire and Haley, but this sort of thing does take away from that a little bit.
The girls visit the pool that night to check out the creature Claire saw, and
they discover a mermaid.
They make their own marine discovery.
Yeah, Haley's taking after her mother whether she likes it or not.
But they drop sardines and fish sticks into the pool to lure out the creature.
And gummy worms. Don't forget the gummy worms.
Yeah, what Aquamarine picks up and eats is actually one of the gummy worms Haley was snacking on and accidentally drops in. I think that detail was a little charming.
I think it was because they were sponsored by gummy worms. And they're like, what attracts mythical creatures? Not sardines, not fish fingers, but our gummy worms. Drop gummy worms in your pool today to conjure a mythical creature and get that wish and get that boy, girls.
Only for $9.99.
Terms and conditions apply. That was a fun detail because Aquamarine is supposed to be sort of like a more modern take on the mythical creature. Because she's got like the changing nail polish and the earrings, and it's not stuff you would associate with the typical fabled creature. So the fact that she likes gummy worms, that's actually a pretty fun detail, you're right.
It's the 90s kid version of a mermaid.
Yeah.
They have like moot nail polish.
Yeah. And this is actually pretty apparent in her introduction as well, because she's pretty, I don't want to use the word mean because that's too extreme, but she's like a little bit snappy, a little bit sarcastic, and that was a bit of a surprise to me because that's not how I was expecting her to be at all, but it was like a fun surprise. I just had one main issue about this scene. I have this issue regarding multiple other points in the movie, but the order of events seems a little bit nonsensical at some points. At one stage, Aquamarine offers to let Haley touch her tail, and then she suddenly flies in an arc above the pool, and when she lands, she grabs Claire's foot to see what is happening? Why? It makes no sense to me. There's also a part where they're talking about her abilities because she manipulates the water to bring the gummy worm towards her. And if she's showing off what she can do, to me, it makes more sense to have that there. It was just very random because keep in mind I'm watching this for the first time, so a lot of it is flying over my head. So as a first time viewer, I was just like,
Where's the scene going, right?
Yeah, a little. In the beginning, Aquamarine speaks English for like a full minute where she's introducing herself. And the thing they think to think after all this is, you speak English? It's just stuff like that felt a little bit weird.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
To be fair, I don't know if I would be as quick on my feet if I had seen a mermaid, so maybe I'm being too harsh.
The next day, Aquamarine has transformed her tail into legs because the pool is being drained and she can't stay there anymore. Claire and Haley try to help, giving up Haley's t-shirt for her to wear.
Yeah, the t-shirt to dress thing was so funny to me.
Yeah, me too.
I honestly can't tell if the movie is insulting its target demographics' intelligence by thinking that they might believe that this is something that could actually happen.
Well, my theory is Aquamarine is the first one of those, shitty, unrealistic clothing life hack people.
She went on to start 5-minute crafts.
Yeah. I have to say, though, as a kid, that t-shirt to dress thing was such a big deal. I was like, I want to do that. Obviously, you can't.
Yeah.
But yeah, imagine if you could.
I'm more inclined to believe mermaids exist than to think that it would be possible to turn a tiny t-shirt into an actual full-fledged dress.
I know you're not that familiar with Aquamarine, but this is actually like one of those iconic moments in the movie. The whole t-shirt to dress thing. One of the things most people remember about this movie is this weird t-shirt to dress. Or not weird, but magical or whatever.
I guess I will accept the explanation of magic because what other choice do I have?
So we kick off the fish out of water story with Aquamarine and the kids acting as the straight man. We find out that the storm was caused by Aquamarine's dad because he was upset that she was trying to get out of her upcoming wedding. Finally, we get the mission parameters. She has to prove to her dad that love isn't a myth in 3 days, or she has to marry the merman her dad has chosen for her. I do wonder, is it that mermaids don't have love, or her father specifically doesn't believe in love, or rather romantic love specifically, or maybe just non-familial love? I'm not quite sure. I'm not that fussed about it, but it did make me wonder.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of when she mentioned her whole quest is, do you not have love? And by love, it's like, don't her parents love her? Or are there no mermaids who love each other? Or there are no different kinds of love apart from the romantic kind? And it just feels like a half-baked idea that they didn't really bother to flesh out because it raises all sorts of questions for me. And it is true, maybe it's just something that her family believes because she says we don't have love, and it's unclear whether she's talking about the whole mermaid kind or if it's just her family. So it could be the latter, and I suppose that's a little bit more believable that it's just a family of very cynical mermaids.
That would be so funny if Aquamarine comes from a family of really cynical mermaids and she's the black sheep of the family just because she's really bubbly and believes in love and blah blah blah. Oh, that would be so funny.
Everyone in her family constantly has black nails because they're all emo.
Anyway, they happen to see Raymond when they're talking about this, and Aquamarine decides she wants him to prove that love exists. She literally sprints his way and immediately asks if he loves her. No introduction or anything, and obviously he says no to this complete stranger. But as they introduce Raymond in this scene, the whole sequence is this over-the-top shirtless guy running across the beach and showering under the rainfall, and the music is the sultry bass and reverb. It makes me laugh so much. It was such a joy. Because they're not doing it seriously, It really amused me.
Aquamarine's decision to settle her sights on Raymond felt a little bit arbitrary to me because the first time she sees him is from a huge distance existence. It can't even really be based on looks or anything. And obviously, it's not based on his personality because she knows nothing about him. And once she settles on him, she's set on it. She doesn't even change her mind when he says he doesn't love her. She's not like, okay, I'll move on to the next person. So that was a bit weird.
Yeah, I agree. I think part of it is also the arbitrariness of it. That's kind of the point. I don't know how intentional it is in the writing, but I like that it's random because it's clear that she has no reason to want Raymond. Like, she has such a misguided idea of romantic love. So I like that it's arbitrary, but I also don't know why she chose him.
I partially agree with you. I think that's a great indication of the fact that it's not really the point for her to find her true love. It's just that she's on this mission and she's going to accomplish it however she can with whoever she can find. But what it doesn't explain is why she's so set on him. It would make more sense to me if it had been the girls who gave her the idea because they were fangirling so hard over him.
That's so much better.
It also would have potentially led on to later the girls becoming a little bit more disillusioned with their perfect idea of Raymond, because that isn't really dealt with in any capacity. Like, they idolize him from start to finish.
Yeah, you're right. So, at first, the girls don't want to help Aquamarine get Raymond to tell her that he loves her. But then she reveals that anyone who helps a mermaid gets a wish.
Ooh.
The girls are now dead set on getting Raymond to tell Aquamarine that he loves her so that they can get their wish. Because obviously, they want to use this wish so that Haley can stay in Florida. I want to bring up one specific moment. They're talking about Haley's mom's work and how she's traveled all over and has been working towards cleaning the ocean. Aquamarine makes a comment about how she can totally tell because the water's been better lately compared to years before. And Haley's really stunned by this revelation that her mother's work is important and makes an impact and means something. And you can see her start to see the value in what her mom is doing and why moving around so much might just be worth it. And it was a moment I really liked.
That's a great point. I didn't quite catch that, but now that you mention it, I can see from her perspective how difficult it might have been for her to gauge exactly the importance and the impact of her mom's work. But now she has living proof literally standing in front of her, telling her that her mom is doing work that's having an actual positive impact. So yeah, I can see that as the starting point for her to realize that, you know, maybe moving to Australia won't be the worst thing.
Well, jumping into our mission, the girls start teaching Aqua to do all these things to get Raymond's attention. They prank call him, they bike past his house, they read all these magazines that teach them how to flirt. And it's all littered with ridiculous, contradicting advice on how to act around a guy. I really like that they just kind of lay it out. The girls are giving her advice that is ridiculous, and it's because they've been fed all of this from these stupid fucking magazines. And Aqua's like, this is fucking bullshit. And I quite liked that whole thing.
Yes, I liked that too. Because this is a real struggle, because women and girls are often expected to be two different things at once. But what I didn't like is that they follow the magazine's advice anyway and are successful in getting the guy's attention. So in a way, it's like the movie is validating everything that the magazines say.
I don't think so, because the girls are so bad at it.
They are.
It just so happens that Raymond is kind of like a pet who's attracted to shiny things. Because he's just a tool in the story, right? He's not a real character. But the way that all of this advice and whatever is portrayed in the movie is clearly ridiculous. Like, we're supposed to understand that even the ones that the girls have absorbed and tell Aqua is the right thing to do, the movie is framing it in a way that says, this is stupid. So that's why I liked it.
I suppose my question then is it that the things they've memorized and are trying out, is it that those things are ridiculous, or is it that the girls are just really bad at it? Because what if they had been good at it? Then would it have been successful? Like, I can't quite distinguish whether the joke is that the magazines are ridiculous or that the girls are ridiculous.
I just took it as the magazines being ridiculous instead of the girls, but also the girls are ridiculous, not in a mean way, just in a they're very kid-like. I don't know, but that's a good point.
I suppose the movie can do both.
When they bike past his house, Aqua falls off the bike and Raymond sees her and leaps off his fucking balcony as music plays in the background, and it's a full-on slow-mo Baywatch moment. I lost my fucking mind. It's just so playful and is clearly making fun of the whole concept. I had so much fun with it.
I guess it's portraying the way the girls see Raymond as some kind of superhero rushing to the rescue. And I do like how throughout the movie we're really steeped in the girls' perception of Raymond. Like, we never break out of it. And that's partly my issue. I wish we kind of had towards the end, but throughout it adds some comedic touches like this one where we are basically seeing Ray through the girls' rose-tinted glasses. That was pretty funny.
I think if there's any moment that cements it for me that it's supposed to be a joke, it's this one.
They should have just kept inserting more and more.
Every time the camera pans over to Raymond, the movie starts to ramp up, the slow motion starts, there's wind everywhere.
Yeah. The wind picks up and ruffles his hair. Maybe that's why he was so late rescuing Aquamarine, is because he just moves in slow motion.
Yeah, that's why he's late at the end. Okay. The next big progress is when they go to the street fair and the girls teach Aqua how to attract his attention and approach him. So this is what we were talking about with the, ridiculous advice. It's so perfect how Aqua applies it all in real life because it looks so bizarre acted out.
Yeah, true. Now that you're saying it.
Yeah, once you finally do it, it's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. It looks really weird. I just really enjoy how she's so bad at it all, and it just really pushes these idiotic how to get a boy 101s to the very limits of absurdity, and you can see how trash it is.
Yeah, now that you say it like that, I think this might actually be a good way of deterring girls from following advice like this in these magazines, because they can see in front of their eyes how dumb it all is. And actually, initially it was bugging me how weird the scene is where they're kind of all just standing there glancing at each other, and Aquamarine is acting really weird, trying to flip her hair. And once again, the pacing felt really weird to me. But maybe that's a part of the whole thing. It's like trying to highlight exactly how absurd and ridiculous it all is. So maybe, I'll give the filmmakers some credit. Maybe it was intentional in this case.
It's multiple things, right? It's the advice being stupid in the first place, but it's also Aqua being a fish out of water and not knowing how humans act.
Though it almost felt like the filmmakers didn't know how humans act the way the whole thing is written. This is a complaint I have at other points in the movie as well, that the characters, sometimes it seems like they've been written by people who don't know how humans interact. One moment that stood out to me earlier on is when they're talking about the wish and they decide on their plan, and then Aquamarine introduces herself and just walks away. Like, she says they're having a completely different conversation, and then all of a sudden she's like, "I'm Aquamarine. Let's go." Something like that. It was so weird to me because they've spent so much time together already. Surely they have introduced each other. And if not, then do you not want to know their names? You're just going to walk away. How does she learn their names? Aquamarine just never learns their names, I think. Do you ever hear her calling either one of them by their names? I don't think so.
No!
Yeah, she calls them
Kid 1 and Kid 2.
Yeah. You there.
Yeah. But yeah, like we said, Aqua does catch his eye and they do spend time together. He gives her a blow-up dolphin, gets her cotton candy, and take her on a paddle boat. He also invites her to the last splash. So things are going well.
So after the cotton candy, the two of them decide to go on these water bikes. And one thing that struck me is Claire is initially worried about whether she'll be okay. But Haley responds, she's with Ray, isn't she? And this to me just signifies the extent of her trust and belief in Ray, who, if we think about it, she doesn't really know anything about him.
Yeah.
But she trusts him pretty much blindly because she knows what could happen if Aquamarine falls in the water or something.
And the problem isn't that she'll drown, because she's saying that because, like, Ray's a lifeguard, but I'm like, honey, it's not that Aqua will drown, it's that she'll grow a tail.
Yeah, it's almost like in her idolization of Ray, she's completely missing the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that line just struck me as a good indication of the level of fangirl that they are at.
It's very much putting Raymond up on a pedestal. The little bit that they like about him has become his entire personality. Okay, there's one line where Raymond tells Aqua that she's not like most girls, which is always a bad line. However, I think in this one, it's so funny. I mean, I guess it's still a bad line, but it's like using that line that's in every like bad writing. But in this sense, it's funny because she's a bizarre alien creature, and that's why she's not like other girls, because she's literally a sea creature. It's like straight out of a comedy sketch.
Yeah, you're right. That is a great subversion of that very cheesy line. That is really funny. I like that they at least bond about things that they have in common, though. Because Aquamarine ends up knowing more about Raymond than the girls do. And I liked that they were getting to know each other in a more real way than the girls know Raymond. This is something small but believable, and it gives a little bit more credibility to their relationship going forward.
So that's nice that that's there.
Yeah, and it makes him feel a little bit less like a tool being used for Aquamarine's purposes, because the initial concept to me felt a little bit mean, that her whole purpose is to get someone to say I love you to her. And even though they might not mean it, it's entirely possible that she could get Ray to like her and then just leave. But the fact that they could have an actual bond is kind of nice and makes it seem a little bit less like she's using him.
So, because Raymond has asked Aqua to the last splash, now they have to get ready for it. So they go shopping for a dress. Montage time!
I have to say, the way this montage is introduced is in a scene the night before when Claire and Haley are talking, and all of a sudden, Claire lets out this gigantic gasp when she realizes that Aquamarine has nothing to wear to the dance. It's like it's the end of the world or something. But yeah, they go to the mall the next day and we get a fun shopping montage. And I say fun in not a totally sincere way because I'm a little bit tired of montages, especially of the shopping kind.
I love montages. Give me all the montages. There's a reason why Morning Glory is my favorite movie.
Yes, because it's composed almost exclusively of montages.
Yeah.
They end up getting their dresses at a vintage shop, and the way that the shop is introduced made me suspect that maybe they're a sponsor for the movie or something, because initially the girls don't want to go in because they think it's for old people or something. But then I guess it's Aquamarine who is like, there's so many one-of-a-kind things here, something that
Yeah.
sounds advertisement like. I almost expected her to be like, there's also 50% sale Monday through Thursday. Visit between 9 to 5 or something, at your nearest mall. I don't know. It was a bit jarring.
Yeah. But one thing they do forget to buy is a pair of earrings.
Dun dun dun.
But Aqua usually wears starfish as earrings. So they go to the pier and she calls dolphins to take Haley, farther out to sea to find a couple of starfish for Aqua to wear. And Claire doesn't want to get in the water. And I do like that they're showing how Claire is missing out on amazing opportunities because of her trauma and fear. And even Haley says it because Claire asks her how it was, and the only thing she says is that it's something she wishes she could have done with Claire. And I think that was also a really nice moment between the two of them, because obviously it was wonderful, but Haley's kind of turning it into like a learning moment or just like a way to tell off her friend or something. Where like, well, it would have been better if I could have been with you.
Yeah, I didn't catch that actually, but that's a great observation, that all she can think to say when she comes back after this amazing experience is that she had been missing her best friend. So far, we've seen Claire decline any sort of situation where she might be near the water. So it would have been nice to have some kind of gradual development of her overcoming her phobia, because obviously at the final crucial scene, we see her take a giant leap that kind of comes out of nowhere. So it would have been nice to see some more gradual development.
Yeah, right. I think the only progress I can say this might be is Claire seeing that this trauma is holding her back. This fear is holding her back. Like, if there is anything to gain in this scene on Claire's part, maybe it's that. But yeah, I wish they did a better job of the progression.
No, but this might actually be a key moment for her. That's a good observation. Because so far, I initially had been thinking that Haley sort of treats Claire's phobia as something not really that serious, because she says once or twice, like, come on, you have to do this with me. And when she doesn't really push her, and she just kind of gets on with it. But now that I think about it, I guess there's not really much that she can do except remind her friend that they could have shared an amazing experience together.
It's reframing the issue, right? It's not just about getting over the fear, it's the fact that there's so many things you're missing out on now.
That was a subtle way of going about it, actually.
But in the scene, we also find out that Aqua saw Claire's parents before they died. And I actually don't have that many thoughts on it. It happens in the movie and it doesn't make me feel anything.
Yeah, I don't know if it was supposed to come as a surprise, but the moment she started talking about the couple, immediately I was like, obviously it's Claire's parents. But actually, I did notice upon a second closer rewatch that we see in the beginning of the movie a shot of Claire's nightstand, and there's a picture of the boat and her parents standing in front of it, and it says Claire de Lune. There's these little moments that have a surprising amount of thought behind them in this movie, like this thing with the boat. Like, they show it earlier on, so it's not like it comes out of completely nowhere that her parents have this blue boat called Claire de Lune.
That is really nice. But Haley does get the starfish, and they're these little starfish that just stick on your earlobe. But they're so cute and they're alive and they give you compliments.
Yeah.
So while they're having lunch or something, suddenly the mean girls tell them that Raymond is actually taking Cecilia to the last splash, which upsets Aqua and makes her want to give up. Haley and Claire are scared they'll lose their wish and, their one last hope to stay in Florida. So Haley goes after Aqua, while Claire goes to find Raymond to straighten things out. And this is one of my favorite things about this movie. I like that it's never really about Raymond, because she has such a shallow, twisted idea of love. It's the heartbreak of finding out that love isn't what she thought it was. But also what the girls want out of this is for Haley to stay. It's just these really human desires that is very easy to understand and relate to, instead of lofty expectations of love or whatever. The motivation behind it is very grounded and real.
Yeah, you're right. And it also prevents the whole story from being the typical girl wants to end up with guy and can't have a happy ending unless that happens.
But Haley talks to Aqua, and I really love that what she talks about is how love is often a rocky road. That's how she convinces Aqua to stay. And the line I love specifically from her is this quote, "Love doesn't always work." It's a really realistic view, and it's contrasted against this really two-dimensional view of it via magazines and crushes and all of this very over-the-top things that we've learned so far. And that's why I love what they do in this movie. It's very clear that on the surface, these kids' perception of relationships is molded by these really toxic magazines and aren't realistic, and it's all very shallow and artificial. But you can clearly see that they also know that in real life, it's a lot more complicated. It's not an easy one and done deal. Haley knows that her father told his family that he loved them and then left them anyway. Claire's parents clearly loved each other, but that didn't save them from tragedy, and how much Claire loves her parents hurts her instead. Having these two things side by side in this movie was really nice to see, and allows Aquamarine, the movie, to be appealing and digestible to kids while staying really grounded. And honestly, that's pleasantly surprising. Like, this is exactly the kind of thing that's perfect for the graveyard slot, in my opinion. Everything on the surface makes it so easy to dismiss, but there's a lot of substance there that's worth it if you pay even a little bit of attention. That's my favorite thing. The absurd heights of this movie, all the boy crazy shit, all the weird advice, all the hijinks, and then it's all grounded by the fact that these girls have actually gone through enough that they understand that love hurts in a way. And like Aquamarine is somebody who is a stranger to these contradicting ideas and the layers of wonder and potential hurt love in any form can have. And we get to explore that complexity with fresh eyes and through the eyes of these very young girls. Claire and Haley love each other so much that the idea of being separated is killing them. It's painful, but they still love nonetheless. I just really enjoy how we're using the very simple story of trying to get the guy, like, to explore these much deeper relationships these girls have with each other and the people around them.
Yeah, I also really liked this scene. It had a really refreshing take on the idea of love because, like you said, most of the time the main characters have been more preoccupied by what they've read in magazines, the more superficial, surface level stuff. But this is where it just becomes a lot more grounded and realistic, and actually pinpointed another one of Haley's lines where she says, "When you find love, it's really beautiful," or at least that's what I've read in magazines. And I feel like it simultaneously shows her as somewhat naive, which is fair enough considering her age, and also idealistic because despite what happened with her father, despite what she knows has happened with Claire, and how you say, their love for each other is hurting them because they're going to be separated. But despite all of that, she still chooses to believe that love can bring you happiness. So I think that shows her character in a really subtle but effective way. Yeah, I think this scene is one of the stronger ones in the movie, and it's one of those scenes that saves it from being about flat, boy-obsessed characters who have nothing else defining them except their interest in a boy. So it was really well done.
Yeah. Claire, on the other hand, is having much worse luck.
Yeah.
Raymond is at a pool party and she has to go see him there, and she ends up straightening things out, and it was all a misunderstanding, but someone tries to dump her in the pool and she's, understandably very scared. But, that's when Raymond sees that Cecilia, who he was spending time with at the party, isn't very nice.
My question remains, what was the plan? Because Cecilia lies, but what did she think would happen? Like, that they wouldn't tell him the truth? And what was her ingenious plan to prevent him from finding out? All she did was lie, and then when he found out, she was like, I was kidding.
Yeah. So the last splash happens. Raymond's going with Aqua, and I do like these fish out of water moments, like the salt in the water thing.
That was a little strange to me. But actually, the fact that Raymond was willing to try it when he saw Aquamarine drink it, I thought that was kind of sweet.
But he asks her to dance, and she's like, I don't know how to dance. And he's like, it's fine, I'll teach you. But then he starts dancing, and he's an awful dancer. I'm like, if you're gonna have to see it, at least teach your actor how to dance.
Well, he's a generic white dude, so he has the confidence of a generic white dude, whether he has the skills or not.
Fair.
But actually, the actor's questionable dancing aside, I do like how Raymond gets her to dance by using a water analogy, because more than what has been established already, it makes me think they have other things in common as well, since they both spend time in water and it's like a common language.
That's a good point. There is a reason for them to be together.
Yeah. The more we talk about it, the more convinced we get.
They have a great night, but before Aqua can ask if Raymond loves her, the sun starts to set and she has to leave for the water tower, which is where she's staying for the night.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've mentioned, but she can't be exposed to moonlight because otherwise her legs will disappear and her tail will pop out. I don't know how the magic works.
Yeah.
But yeah, this scene where they're trying to get Aquamarine to leave, I didn't really feel a sense of urgency because it's a pretty big deal. But she's just kind of standing there, and they're also standing there watching her talk to Raymond, and it all feels very awkward and anticlimactic. I think one of the movie's weaker points is building tension during these moments, because it happened earlier on as well when they were on the water bike and they were pedaling furiously to get back to shore, but the boat was just sort of gliding along very gracefully and slowly, and it just undercuts the tension we're supposed to be feeling.
Yeah, they do not know how to do an action scene.
Yeah.
Aqua does make it to the water tower in time. And hey, here's an absurd conclusion. Aqua's poisoning the entire town by contaminating the water distributed from the tower.
Yeah, that cannot be hygienic, the fact that she's camping out in the entire town's supply of water.
The next day, it seems that Haley has come around to this idea of moving to Australia, so she's taken Moby, her fish, her pet fish, to Claire and tells her to take care of him. But Claire is still in denial, and they start fighting about what they should wish for, because Haley thinks, it's not fair to her mom. I do like that we see Haley starting to realize that her mom deserves this progression in her career.
Considering everything we've seen so far, I'm really glad that we get this revelation on her part because it shows positive character development and there's conceivable reason for her to have this change of heart. Another thing I like about this scene is it illustrates pretty well the way that Haley and Claire are both a little bit codependent on this friendship. Although I think it would have been nicer to see these issues cropping up a little earlier on. On Claire's part, she does seem to have more doubts and anxieties, especially concerning the water that Haley sort of helps her deal with, like we talked about earlier. But I think it would have been nicer to see Haley's issues a little bit more because we get this backstory for her that she's moved around a lot because of her mom's job, and that has an effect, presumably, on the way that she connects with people. But we've never seen Haley interact with anyone besides these handful of characters. So it's not really clear that she's meant to be a social pariah in this town, that no one else really talks to her because she's so quote-unquote angry at the world. I think that's how Claire phrases it. So that came a little bit out of nowhere. Would have been nice to see it earlier on.
Yeah, same. Right after this fight, Claire immediately sees on the news that they're covering the water tower and they have to get there quick because last night Cecilia had followed them to the water tower and climbed up there and saw Aquamarine. She knows that she's a mermaid and she's told her dad some fake story to, have an excuse for somebody to go up there and see what she saw. So she's dragged her dad and his news crew and there's a crowd and paramedics, except they don't find anything. The only thing left up there is the blow-up dolphin.
My question is, why is Cecilia's dad, the weatherman, reporting on this incident?
You're right.
He's the only reporter in town? He's an all-rounder. Yeah, so we find out that Aquamarine has managed to escape the water tank with Leonard's help. This whole time, we have seen bits and pieces here and there of Leonard growing more and more suspicious of Aquamarine, and he overhears Cecilia when she's ranting at her friends about there being a mermaid in the water tank. So he figures things out and helps her out, and in return, he gets a wish, which is where things get a little bit strange.
Dicey.
Yeah. We get this indication that there's someone at the beach club that he likes. We don't get to hear his wish, but later on in the movie, we see that he is now going out with her.
Creepy.
Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say he asked for social skills or the courage to talk to her or something non-creepy.
Sure. Now that Aqua's alright, she can finally meet up with Raymond one last time. It's her last chance. Time is running out, and she has to get him to say that he loves her. And they're at the pier, the girls are listening in. She asks him, and predictably, he says no. I really like that that's how they ended, that he does say no, because it makes no sense that he says yes.
And even more than that, the fact that he says, why can't we work our way there, is so realistic and nice.
I love it. I love that line.
Because we get talk of true love and happily ever after and the one and soulmates in so many movies, even when the characters have known each other a handful of
days.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say a handful of months, but most of the time it's even less than that. And it's so refreshing to see a character resist this idea of falling in love at first sight and acknowledge that it takes time to get there. And he's willing to invest that time. That was actually surprisingly refreshing and nice to see, especially in this genre.
Maybe I do like Raymond after all.
Yeah. Understandably, Aquamarine is upset though because she has this deadline she has to meet. But before they can really talk through things, Cecilia appears and pushes Aquamarine into the water. It's just disappointing that there's no positive character development for her at all. She's a very flat character. She only exists because of her interest in Raymond and then to be humiliated in front of everyone. And she doesn't have a character arc like our main characters do, which is a shame.
For sure. But obviously, Aquamarine turns into a mermaid. And now that she's in the ocean starts, turning into this whirlpool that's carrying her back home. And Raymond sprints off to get his supplies or whatever to go and save her. But I'm like, save her from what? She's a mermaid. From the ocean?
That's a good point. Maybe it's because she's screaming and panicking, and so he realizes something's not quite right.
Yeah. But she gets to hold on into this buoy or something, and the girls are trying to help, and what could you even do?
Yeah, seriously. It's already a little bit unbelievable considering Claire's phobia of water, which goes from 100 to 0 real quick. But the fact that also they are children, and these are gigantic tides that they're fighting against, but somehow they managed to make it to the buoy as well. Again, I don't know what the plan is really.
Yeah.
Consistently throughout this movie, I am searching for the plan.
On the subject of Claire's sudden bravery, I do agree that the progression is quite sudden and abrupt, but if I were to rationalize it, I think it's because it's been reframed for her where this fear and this trauma has held her back from things that she wants to do, like the swimming with the dolphins. So now she thinks of it as, my trauma is holding me back from helping my friend instead of, the fear. And what happens here is that helping Aquamarine is a bigger priority for her than that fear. She's finally found something that means enough for her to jump into the water.
I'm not sure I'm entirely convinced by the first part of your point, because the whole reframing thing was done in a more positive light where she's missing out on life because of her phobia. But I do see how having someone that she cares about would push her to put that aside and reframe her priorities, like you said.
But the girls still think that Raymond has told her that he loves her. And he didn't, so Aqua has to go back to her father.
Yeah, they realize they won't get their wish. They start to say goodbye, and I think the girls basically ask Aquamarine if there's anything they can do, and Aquamarine tells them that they've already done so much. They jumped into the ocean for her, and they realize how much they love each other. And that is enough to convince Aquamarine's father that real love does exist.
It's not unpredictable, it's not surprising, but it's nice. It's just very warm. And the funniest part for me is when suddenly Raymond comes out of nowhere on his little surfboard, and I'm like, oh, I forgot he was supposed to come and save them. I just forgot he existed.
Exactly. I had the same thought. I genuinely just forgot that he existed.
Yeah.
Which I suppose does go to show that the movie was never about him and Aquamarine all along. It was more about the three girls. But yeah, he does take comically long to get to Aquamarine. Everything is already passed by the time he gets there. There's no need for him anymore.
Well, you know how those slow-mo lifeguards are.
Yeah, but he and Aquamarine have a little moment.
But when Aquamarine asks them what they want for their wish, they don't immediately jump on the Haley staying in Florida thing. They end up
keeping their wish for the time being. And I think it's hinted that they'll use it for Claire to visit Haley in Australia later on, which I think is much nicer.
I like how it ends, and it's a much more mature ending.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we end with a really sweet and solemn ending where the girls come to terms with their separation and say goodbye to each other just for the day for now, but they're ramping up to a real goodbye. It's a really nice ending as well because, this is about that time in your life where things are changing, and at that young an age, for most kids, this is the time when you finally realize that there are some things in life you can't quite change. It's not just a moment of saying goodbye, but it's a moment of growing up. It's that shift. In a way, it's like a coming of age moment. So I quite liked that this is where we end, and this is how it ends.
Yeah, that was well said. A part of me did wonder whether we should have seen their actual goodbye on screen, but I actually like it better this way because it ends on a bittersweet note and a much quieter and less dramatic note, and that balances out the rest of the hijinks in the movie. This ending indicates to me that the story is more than it seems on the surface because everything the girls go through in the story serves a purpose. We see some very real development on not only the girl's part, but also on Aquamarine's part, where she realizes that her idea of love had been really limited this whole time. Because real love between Claire and Haley was staring her in the face and she didn't realize it. Seeing their growth was really satisfying.
That's all we have to say for Aquamarine.
Yeah.
And we've learned a few things here.
I think the first thing we can take away from this movie is that Haley's mom has been trying to move for the last 10 years, but keeps getting delayed by Haley just continuously unpacking their things.
Another absurd conclusion is that Ray is really, really off a lifeguard. He's just really slow.
He's a slow-mo lifeguard.
Yeah, he's an all-time slow-mo lifeguard.
The third absurd conclusion is that Aquamarine probably ends up being the CEO of 5-minute fashion life hacks after this. She could start a whole line of t-shirts that magically morph into a dozen different types of dresses. She must be a billionaire by now.
She and Raymond are slow-mo swimming through the seven seas. Our final absurd conclusion is that actually a few days after this, basically the entire town just came down with
some sort of bacterial infection. Because she's like half fish. It's not even like a human is swimming around in there. She's half fish.
Aquamarine has been poisoning the town's water supply, so everyone's just down for the count. Haley doesn't get to move after all because because she's too sick.
Yeah, that's why Aquamarine had that urgent deadline, right? Because she knew time was limited in that town.
She's done this to a dozen other towns before. She knows what's coming.
And on that morbid note,
now that we've watched this movie and discussed it in excruciating detail, what are your thoughts on it now and would you recommend it?
Having watched it, and moreover having discussed it, I would definitely recommend this movie. I think it's a fun watch. And while I wouldn't call it brave or unconventional or anything, I think I'm going to give it credit for the fact that it doesn't put romance in the spotlight and frame it as the be-all end-all. Given the emphasis that is given to these sorts of relationships for girls from a pretty early age, I think it's really important to take the focus away from that from time to time and tell stories that feature other types of relationships, especially positive female relationships.
I agree. I definitely recommend this movie. I think it's a fun time, and I think people who say this is just like shallow and it's about boys and it's blah blah blah, I think they're kind of missing the point. The part that I would agree with is how well they execute what they're trying to do. Like, I don't think I was, digging too deep or whatever. I think that is what they're trying to do. Like, tell a story of love that's not perfect and often painful through the lens of this quite shallow take on it. And it's debatable how successful they were at executing that. And the production value isn't the best, the acting isn't stellar, but I really like the substance there. And if you've seen this movie and you loved it as a kid, I would encourage people to rewatch this movie and maybe see what you missed and see the way this movie was trying to blend these two contrasting ideas together, because it's honestly kind of really interesting. So not only do I recommend this movie, but I recommend it to people who already have seen it and maybe haven't revisited it as an adult. I think you guys should rewatch this movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't go in expecting any kind of production value. Especially the pacing and the dialogues sometimes struck me as a little bit off, but overall, the substance is there.
Well, next time we'll be discussing Ice Princess. If you have any thoughts to share on the movie, send them in at graveyard_slot on Twitter and Instagram, or email us at thegraveyardslot@gmail.com so we can share on the podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Graveyard Slot.